Guess who's back? It's another math episode from Mr. Mac. Alright. So, for task number 3, again, you're not allowed to use any calculators, and on this section, you want to make sure you're showing all work for the following questions. Be sure to write a complete sentence because it might save you in the future. So, question number 1. If the annual rainfall for a town near Santa Fe was 12.35 inches in 1960, 13.206 inches in 1961, and 11.5 inches in 1962. What was the total rainfall for the 3 years? I want you to think about it, and after you think about it, let's go ahead and start underlining some of the important terms. So what were some of the important terms that you either highlighted or underlined? For me personally, was just realizing that in this town near Santa Fe, we had 12.35 this year. We then had 13.206 in this year. And then we went further along to have this amount in 1962. Last thing that's going to be very essential is figuring out the total rainfall for the 3 years. So we're dealing with 3 numbers, and then we want the total rainfall. When you see the term total, what does that make you think of? Awesome. That's what you want. You want it to make you think about the sum. So we want to find the sum of these 3 decimals to figure out what will be that total rainfall for these 3 years. Let's go ahead and do that. Before you go in and do it, please make sure you line up your decimals. I don't want to, as I stressed it in task number 1, you want to make sure you line up your decimals. Now, before I go any further, I just want to also emphasize that it's imperative to line up the decimals vertically, kind of like how I did over here. Just put a little arrow there. Get rid of that. And this ensures that each digit is in the correct place value, making our addition accurate. Now we can go ahead and fill in the missing decimal places with zeros. I use them as our placeholders. What normally guides me through this process, I first want to evaluate the number that has the most amount of values that comes after our decimal. So for instance, when I'm looking at this question, in 13.206, or you can say 206 thousandths, that 6 over here extends all the way to the thousandths place, which is 3 values past our decimal. So I want to make sure that each of the 2 numbers that are vertically above follow the same exact representation. So this number over here that extends to our 10th place, and as a small reminder, remember your 10th place extends with 1 value after the decimal. Let's make it go to the 100th place, and now it also goes to the thousandths place. Same thing with 12.35. It started off in the 100th place. I add 1 more 0, and now it extends to the thousandths place. Now that's an ugly little 0, so let's just correct that a little bit. It's a little bit better. Okay. Next step, let's go ahead and start doing the addition. This is normally our easier part, so it's nothing that we can't handle. We start adding from the rightmost column. Remember to carry over any numbers as needed. 0 plus 0 plus 6 gives us 6. 5 plus 0 plus 0 is 5. 3 plus 5 plus 2 gives us a total of 10. And there goes that number we need to carry over. When we add, it's okay to just drop that decimal down, different from when we're multiplying. Next, 1 plus 2 plus 1 is 4, plus another 3 gives us 7, and 1 plus 1 plus 1 then gives us 3. And we found out that the total rainfall was 37 and 56 thousandths inches. And that's it. On to question number 2. David and Robert received their monthly salary for working at GameStop. David earned $523.86 and Robert earned $318.90. How much more did David earn than Robert? So again, the first thing we want to do is highlight these important terms. The first thing I highlighted was David's earnings. We're also going to highlight Robert's earnings. And we're going to also highlight, lastly, how much more did David earn than Robert. So we see that David had more than Robert, and we just need to figure out exactly how much more. Okay? Let's do this. So when we find the difference between 2, again, we also want to make sure we line up our decimals. Once your decimals are lined up and we make sure we have the same amount of values, in this scenario, we're dealing with money, which extends to the hundredths place. both numbers extend to the hundredth place. So let's go find the difference. 6 minus 0 is 6. Alright, we can't do 8 minus 9, so we're going to borrow. 18 minus 9 gives us 9. I bring down my decimal vertically down. We can't do 2 minus 8, so we borrow again. 12 minus 8 gives us 4. 1 minus 1 gives us 0. And 5 minus 3 gives us 2. So our final answer is $204.96. And remember, we're always going to finish off with a sentence. In conclusion, David earned $204.96 more than Robert. On to question number 3. A 5-pound bag of orange costs $7.99. What is the price of oranges per pound? Alright, so let's go again and start our highlighting. 5 pounds of these oranges are $7.99, and we honestly only want to figure out how much one of them are. So let's highlight that 5 pound. Let's highlight the cost. And the goal is to figure out the price of oranges per pound, meaning for 1 pound. Alright, so with that in mind, we should expect the cost to go down. If 5 of them were $7.99, that's kind of your hint to kind of figure out which way we're expecting the money to go for the cost per pound. And the cost should technically go down. 5 of them was $7.99, so one of them should definitely be cheaper. And the way we go about figuring it out is if 5 of them cost $7.99, we need to divide that price by the amount of pounds, which would be 5. And that's 5 divided into $7.99. So let's go ahead and do so. Unfortunately, decimal's only inside our dividend. So we can actually go ahead and first primarily bump our decimal up above our quotient bar and begin dividing. 5 divides into 7 one time. 5 times 1 gives me 5. So I then find the difference between 7 and 5 and I get 2. I bring down my 9 and I ask myself, how many times does 5 divide into 29? Alright, we want a number that when we multiply it by 5, it needs to be less than or equal to 29. I know 5 doesn't evenly go into 29 because 29 does not end in a 0 or a 5. But I do know that 5 times 5 is actually 25. So when I do my 5 times 5, I get 25 and I find the difference. And I get 4. And now I need to bring my 9 down. And I'm in the same exact scenario where I know 5 doesn't go perfectly into 49, but I know 5 goes into 45 a total of 9 times. Alright, so what I'm going to do, just to make a little bit more space, just bring a little arrow up here. I'm going to have my 45 subtracted from 49. Okay? So once we subtract that, we get 4. But since there were no numbers to actually write after our $7.99, that's where you actually add in a 0. And you bring that 0 down. So once that 0 is here, we have 5 divided into 40. Now since this number ends in a 0 or 5, I know 5 is divisible or can be divided into 40. And 5 times 8 is what would give us 40. So I find the difference and there's no remainder. So when they ask me what's the price of oranges per pound, we can say, alright, it's $1.59 8/1000. That honestly makes no sense. So if that was the answer you wrote, honestly, we couldn't give you full credit. So what you do is you take that number, 1.598, and since we're dealing with money, money needs to be rounded to the nearest hundredth. Alright, so I underline my number in the hundredth place, and I like to draw an arrow. And sometimes I get even a little bit crazy and I draw a line underneath, just so I know that whatever is written after that 9 needs to be let go. If that number after the 9 is a 5 or above, we give the 9 a shove. But if that number after the 9 is a 4 or below, we just let everything go after that line. Okay? In this case, 8 is above the 5. So we can say this is approximately $1.60. And now you just finish it with your perfect sentence. So the oranges cost $1.60 per pound, approximately. Now let's move on to question number 4. If you buy 9.8 gallons of gas at $4.15 per gallon, how much will you spend? Let's go ahead and begin highlighting. So what they're saying is that we want to buy 9.8 gallons,
but only 1 gallon. Notice how I say per gallon, meaning per 1 gallon. 1 gallon is $4.15. If we're trying to figure out how much 9.8 is, we then need to find the product of both quantities. First, we're going to estimate with the numbers here, and then we're going to find the exact amount. So let's go ahead with our estimations. So that 9.8, it's approximately 10 gallons. And that 4.15, we could say is approximately $4. And when we find the product, we end up with 40. So I'm expecting my exact answer to be somewhere near there. And again, when we multiply, you do not need to line up your decimals. So let's set it up. When we do our first row, 8 times 5 is 40. I put my 4 up here. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 4, that's 12. 8 times 4 is 32 plus 1 gives us 33. Alright, now please do not forget, you want to place your 0 on the next row as your placeholder because we're moving over by 10. Alright, we're going from the tens place to the ones place. So my 0's here, and now I can continue multiplying with the 9's. 9 times 5 is 45. I put my 5 here and my 4 above. 9 times 1 is 9 plus 3 gives us 13. Put my 1 above again, and 9 times 4 is 36 plus 1 gives us 37. Lastly, you want to find the sum of both quantities. We got 0, 7, 6, 0, carry a 1, a 4. And the last step of the question is to find out the total amount of values behind our decimal. We got 1, 2, 3. So we move our decimal over a total of 3 places. What do you know? Our answer's mighty close. You write your final sentence, and we're all done. So you'll spend $40.60. You don't add the 0 because that would be to the thousand place, and the money doesn't go to the thousand place. Everyone have a lovely day. See you soon.